We are live.
Okay, hey, so essay tomorrow, that might be of a little bit of concern for you since it is a major grade, since it is a, possible any topic that we've covered this entire 9 weeks. We'll draw it out of the old bucket. It could be Indians, it could be big business, it could be like Gilded Age and the Progressive Era. It could be farmers, it could be workers, it could be imperialism, it could be Teddy Roosevelt. It could be each of the progressive presidents. You don't know. That's the fun of one of these essays. What?
We haven't gone over that actually.
I'm covering Taft and Wilson today, and that's why we're recording this for the absent people. Just in case you lose it, you zone out today, understand that everything on Taft and Wilson potentially could be in that essay tomorrow. Madeline.
Okay, so during V-Walk today,
I'm here.
okay, so if I come and then I ask you, hey, let's review some topics.
Yeah, that's what we did all day yesterday. We had that list of every essay
Okay,
ever.
When he says review topics, though, you ask him questions and stuff, he's like, I don't know, or he'll
No.
say, do you know it?
No,
I
we
try to
did
make
it
you do it.
We did it after school. He was helpful.
But I don't just want to tell you the answer, I kind of want you to be able to think your way through it, and I think that'll be the most beneficial process. And let's kind of do that now. Maybe rhetorically, maybe in your head, think about if I pull a Teddy Roosevelt question, I'll say, to what extent does Roosevelt's progressivism fix politics, the economy, and society?
Railroad. Doesn't he give
Ooh, good.
Civil rights. Oh, did
So-
she say that?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you said
We could say that Roosevelt doesn't at all address civil
Women
rights.
or women.
Does he address women?
Yes. Oh.
Women still don't have the right to vote under
I thought the
Roosevelt.
women did get the right
No,
to
but that's
vote.
Not
In
federally.
In 1920.
So we're thinking about it that way, and honestly, the best tip that I can give you about Roosevelt, remember his 3 C's. That will clue you in on 3
what is it?
solid paragraphs that you could write.
Conservation and consumerism.
And this is kind of how I would say. If you remember the 3 C's, think about, okay, he controls the corporations. So if you're able to write, Teddy Roosevelt controls the corporations, you might be in the 60s, but then your next sentence is, for example, he was a trust buster. He went on to, you're in the 68s if you can say that he was a trust buster, but I need something specific. That. He categorizes trust into good trust and bad trust, and he breaks up the bad trust like Northern Securities.
Wow, I love knowledge.
He also regulates the railroads. For example,
Van Elkin Trust?
close. For example, the Hepburn and Elkins Act regulates the railroads, strengthening the ICC. In addition, Roosevelt has care for the consumer. For example, after he reads the book, Upton Sinclair's The Jungle, the Pure Food and Drug Act will be passed, the Meat Inspection Act. You guys could do that Teddy Roosevelt question with ease.
Let's do that.
Maybe.
Make that.
I have a progressive era question on each progressive president.
Did I do good?
And so there'd be 3 paragraphs each one.
Yes.
Yeah, I did.
And probably a to what extent or something. There's an
Wait,
extent
what
of
would you
all.
say? To what extent was it?
If you get to what extent progressive, your extent is going to be African Americans and Native Americans and maybe women. So African Americans are losing rights. I'll tell you the story of Native Americans today, and women are kind of like the very last right gained. By 1920, they get the right to vote. It took them picketing in front of the White House throughout all of World War I to finally get the right to vote.
Isn't there a thing now? It's for every man's dollar, it's what? Isn't that a thing? Is that an actual thing? Because I
Are
feel
you talking about equal pay, equal work?
Yeah, but is that an actual thing today?
Yeah.
It is.
It's
So
a
women do
proposal.
make less still.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, that's kind of sucky.
Yeah, so that would be more of a modern right. And if you want to bring in modern women's rights, the proper term is feminism. That'll be a 1970s to modern day theme. And I will cover all of that in great detail when we get to the 60s, 70s feminist kind of revolution. That'll be interesting for you. Anyway, Teddy's done, kind of. and he's going to handpick the successor. His good friend, not his best friend, but he is friends with Taft, and he thinks that Taft is going to follow in his progressive footsteps. So he will pick Taft, and you know what Teddy does in retirement? Goes lion hunting in Africa. Kind of a cool thing to do. So Roosevelt's going off to Africa on like a full year lion hunt. There he is, but
I thought he runs again.
he's going to come back into politics. More on that in a second. Let's fill our kind of political detail here. We've got the Republican candidate Taft. I bet you can guess and figure out who the Democrat's going to be.
Who's the guy
How
who's
is it
Jennings
William
Bryan?
Bryan?
Yeah, of course, it's WJB. And this is funny, because now William Jennings Bryan's platform is, hey, wait, I'm the progressive. So he tries to run on progressivism, which is what Roosevelt ran on and did. Basically, WJB says, you stole my stuff. And he doesn't really have a chance here. But you know what? There's a third party.
Oh, Eugene Debs.
And look at this. Eugene Debs gets 500,000 votes. What does that tell you? Socialism's rising, or discontent is still there. The masses are still stuck in poverty. The workers are still feeling exploited, so much so they like this radical idea of taking over the business, government control, and sharing the wealth. 500,000 Americans support that, so just kind of think your way through. That's pretty radical. He's going to run again in 1912, he'll run again in 1916, he'll run from prison in 1920.
Wait, how can he run in prison?
He did. I don't know.
What?
Wait, run
He ran for president 5 times.
Anyone can write
From
the
prison.
names, right?
Every time.
Eugene Debs.
Didn't Victoria Woodall do that too?
So
Yeah,
if
but-
you do it, let's say he did win, would he just be taken out of jail?
I have no idea.
What is he gonna be
Well, I mean, he would wait.
I-
if he
I
could
think when he
pardon
ran for
himself,
prison,
yeah.
I don't think he got a ton of votes, but just kind of understand that momentum is building for socialism. Wait till you see 1912. More on that in a second. Let's cover Taft's presidency. Taft's progressivism, he's going to have a Van Buren problem. Maybe that makes sense, maybe it doesn't.
Oh, if they started with an economic panic.
Kind of. Now he doesn't. That was a short-lived panic. I'm more so saying that he's got a Van Buren problem in that he's trying to fill the shoes of like a really big-name president. Van Buren was filling the shoes of Jackson. That's hard to do because think Andrew Jackson dominates, controls, boisterous, loud, charismatic, right? He's got to fill the shoes of Teddy Roosevelt. That's hard to do. Teddy Roosevelt was so animated. The guy drank a gallon of coffee a day. Think how animated one would be. I mean, I drink a lot of coffee. I drink like a venti, a venti red eye. That's coffee and espresso combined.
Do you get that at Starbucks?
Yeah, every morning. But think what a gallon of coffee would do to you. I mean, you would just be running around the room. And Taft has got to try to follow in those footsteps. That's going to be difficult to do. Foreign policy-wise, he implements dollar diplomacy. I kind of introduced that to you already in that it creates future problems. Foreign investment, good at the time. It will increase American business. We do end up controlling a number of foreign companies, but in the end, those foreign countries are going to be mad at us for controlling them. Wait till you see what happens in the 1950s. By the 1950s, those countries want us out and they're willing to take our stuff from those countries. So, works at the time, put a to be continued on dollar diplomacy. It's going to get ugly by the 1950s, as you'll soon see. Super trust buster. He broke up twice as many in half the time. So think about it. Roosevelt gets the nickname because he kickstarts the trust busting. He broke up 40 of them. Whoa, Taft broke up 80. But didn't Roosevelt categorize the trusts?
Good trust and bad trust.
He doesn't.
That was called a good trust by Roosevelt. Roosevelt respected U.S. Steel. Roosevelt thought that was a model of efficiency. Taft broke it up. So Teddy's getting irritated. He's like, whoa, you're not doing what I thought you were going to do. Teddy basically wanted him to just, be his puppet, you could say. So when he starts to break up the good trust, Teddy's going to get, pushed back into politics. More on that in a second. He also breaks up the all-powerful Standard Oil. That was broken into like a dozen rival companies. Some of those rival companies are still with us today, like Exxon. So that was part of the once almighty Standard Oil. So just understand that's going to happen. He is breaking up the trust at a rapid
Is
pace.
Standard Oil a bad trust?
Probably. Ida Tarbell would argue it was a bad trust. It was kind of an unfair monopoly. No competition could ever arise with Standard Oil there. So when it was broken into smaller companies, competitors could kind of be up-and-comers and possibly make money. But Teddy's going to get angry over a couple specifics in a second. So understand that Taft is kind of getting pulled by two directions of the Republican Party. The Teddy wing is the progressive wing. But help me out, what would the other side of the Republican Party be? Who's the big business conservative guy that I taught you? Mark Hanna. So you got the conservative Republicans wanting him to still protect big business. They're pulling Taft one way. The progressives are pulling Taft the other way, and Taft is kind of stuck in the middle. When Taft fails to live up to the progressive ideals that Roosevelt wanted, the Republican Party is going to fall apart. So that's not going to be good for their chances in 1912. Let's do note his Mann-Elkins Act. That's like the most tedious detail that I have on Taft. Basically what happens, the ICC is further strengthened. Remember that ICC originally did nothing, railroads do whatever they want to? Roosevelt comes along, you get the Elkins Act, the Hepburn Act, it regulates the railroads even further. Now it's like even more regulation towards interstate commerce. So he's got that going for him. He is progressive, he's still regulating the railroads. And again, he is a super trust buster. Making sense with that? Taft is still progressive with respect to that, but he does some things that are not progressive. He is influenced by the Mark Hanna wing, and as a result, that will break up the Republican Party. If your party splits, are you going to win?
No.
Why not?
Because there's not enough people voting for it.
Yeah, think about it. If it's split 50-50, you take half of 50%, you will never win with 25%. He's going to pull that Republican Party two different ways, mainly over this issue. The progressives want a lower tariff, the conservatives want a higher tariff. Who does he side with? The high tariff guys. So the progressives get angry and they're starting to break from the Republican Party as a result. So all the progressives, can you figure out why they want a low tariff?
Because they're getting like an indirect income tax now?
Not yet, kind of. It's in the works, it's not officially in there yet. The income tax won't be official until I think 1913. But who does a tariff protect?
Businesses.
Who does it hurt? And everyone else. Because a tariff will raise your prices. So progressives want the equality, progressives want to help the farmer, progressives want to help the common man. This actually raised that tariff rate higher, only further protecting business, hurting the common man. But then there's this weird thing. Don't really stress the details of the actual controversy itself, but understand that Gifford Pinchot, who I taught to you yesterday as part of Teddy Roosevelt's conservation movement, he's Teddy's like best friend. Head of the U.S. Forest Service, fired by Taft. That angers Teddy enough to get back into politics because he's like, why didn't you just fire my best friend? You fired him for insubordination. Roosevelt gets angry. Roosevelt gets back into politics. Roosevelt says, Taft has completely twisted around the policies I advocated and acted upon. Then he starts to get nasty in like 1912 language. You know what he calls Taft? A fathead. And it's kind of cruel. He also says like Taft has the brain the size of a squirrel. I mean, I guess that's kind of cruel in 1912 language. Yeah.
What's the name of the forest drive?
Gifford Pinchot.
Okay.
So it's a controversy over whatever. Don't stress it too much. He gets fired for insubordination, but upon getting fired, Roosevelt makes a comeback. Roosevelt is going to run as the coolest sounding progressive ever. The Bull Moose Party, which just sounds strong and cool, and in part derives from Teddy making a political speech, and a crazy assassin literally shoots Roosevelt in the chest. He's got a bullet in the chest, and he says, "It's going to take more than a bullet to kill this bull moose." And he delivered a 90-minute speech with a bullet in his chest.
What?
Exactly.
Wait, who did that?
Teddy Roosevelt.
Who shot him?
A crazy guy. So he delivers a speech with a bullet in his chest for 90 minutes. His progressive party will be called the Bull Moose Party, and the Bull Moose Party is going to take away from the Republican vote because it's Teddy Roosevelt, right? So kind of a cool sounding political party. There is the Bull Moose.
When do the 2 terms become a thing? You can only serve 2 terms.
With the 22nd Amendment,
How late is that?
1947. Give or take a year or two.
So was one guy about to run for a 3rd one? They're like, we don't want this to happen, or what?
Technically, Teddy only served 1 because he took over through assassination. So he considered it 2 full terms, but yes, he could run again if he felt like it. And again, FDR, he's going to win 32, 36, 40, and 44. And it's after FDR where that 22nd Amendment comes into play.
That's what
So they.
So these are some 1912 political cartoons. This one is kind of making fun of Roosevelt, blending together all sorts of crazy ideas. They're like, hey, we got a little bit of progressivism, a little bit of radicalism, a little bit of conservatism, pure democracy, and he's blending it all together with his progressive bull moose ideas. Here they're suggesting that 1912 politics is a mess, and now Teddy overshadows his opponents. Who are all the opponents? Who's your Republican in 1912? Taft. Progressive in 1912. There's 2 more candidates.
WJB.
You would think, good guess with WJB, but he had lost too many times. So now it's Woodrow Wilson.
Oh,
Yeah.
Woodrow Wilson, though, does not forget about WJB. When Wilson wins, he actually makes Bryan a Secretary of State.
So Roosevelt runs as a progressive?
A bull moose progressive. And then don't forget Eugene Debs. Eugene Debs gets over 1 million votes in this election. We're at the peak of progressivism in 1912. Every one of these guys was progressive in a way. Probably the least progressive, but still breaks up 80 trusts? Very progressive, as we know. Incredibly progressive. So progressive he wants to take the wealth and share it among all. So just think, we're going pretty progressive in 1912. They all had some kind of progressivism with them. Trevor, question?
I was asking, was Woodrow Democratic?
Yes. So, Republican, progressive, Democrat,
Socialist.
and this is what it looks like. They're all kind of there. You divide the Republican with the bull moose, and you get a Wilson victory. That's what happens when you split your party. It's happened time and time again.
Does
Babe.
socialism have an animal or no?
No,
Just a dumb question. I want, no animal thing.
not that I know
What animal would be?
of. I'm Googling, see if there's,
There's an animal.
I don't know.
Well, pick an animal.
I feel like they'd be more aggressive.
Pick one, I don't know.
A tiger.
You familiar though with third parties splitting the vote, resulting in the other guy winning?
Yes.
You guys should be pretty familiar with 1860. Democrats split 1860, Stephen Douglas North, other guy in the South. Who wins in 1860?
Who died in 1860?
Well, Lincoln. So 1992, you weren't alive yet for that, but the
1860?
Republican Party kind of split in 1992. You ready for that story?
Yeah.
It's kind of relevant with George H.W. Bush. Do you want the 32nd version of the Republican Party splitting there?
Oh, yes.
So George H.W. Bush won in 1988. In 1988, George Bush kept saying over and over and over again, read my lips, no new taxes. Read my lips, no new taxes. Every speech, every commercial was, read my lips, no new taxes. Guess what happens during George H.W. Bush's presidency?
He died.
Taxes.
Boom.
He raised taxes.
Oh.
So when he raised taxes, an independent emerged from Texas, a multi-billionaire by the name of Ross Perot. Ross Perot campaigns on no taxes, which is kind of a Republican viewpoint, right?
So he split
You got
the
your
vote?
old schoolers with George H.W., your other Republicans with Ross Perot, allowing Bill Clinton to win with 38% of the vote in 1992. You split the party, the other guy wins. Kind of interesting. Who knows if it'll happen in 2020? There's chatter. There's chatter of another Republican running. There's chatter of an independent running who could pull from the Democrats. So we'll see. I'd say it's possible, not likely, but possible you get another third party in there for 2020. Questions on any of that? Randall?
Taft is just one term, right?
What?
Taft is just one term.
Yeah.
That's what it looks like. Check out Eugene Debs. Eugene Debs over 1 million votes, 7.5%. But check out the Republicans. If you want to consider Teddy Roosevelt a Republican, 27.5%, 23%. That's over 50. You got a landslide if you combine those two. Look what Wilson won with. 42% of the vote.
But he got 82% like total.
Crazy, isn't it? But that's what happens when you split the party. So it could happen again. We'll see it. It's happened time and time again. Just keep your eyes on 2020 or any of those third parties. Did you see the latest independent for 2020 who's considering a run?
Oh, isn't it the guy, the CEO of Starbucks, right?
Howard Schultz.
Probably.
So Howard Schultz has some chatter, but I don't know if that's going to go anywhere because he doesn't really answer any questions. They say, well, what would you do as president? He says, I don't answer hypotheticals. Isn't that what you're supposed to do if you're running for president? So I don't know if the Howard Schultz thing will proceed.
What is like the third party about?
Which one?
The Howard Schultz.
Howard Schultz? We don't know because he doesn't answer any questions. He says that he wants to control the deficit. He says that he probably does not want to tax the rich, but he also says that he doesn't like a lot of the things that President Trump is doing. So it's kind of like a middle road type thing is the best that I can explain it, but you gotta extrapolate a lot from his vague answers. So I don't know. Hey, there's Wilson.
Would you vote for him?
With Woodrow Wilson, he is very progressive. In fact, his new freedom, check out how progressive this is. He wants to spread around the wealth. He wants to take away from those elitist corporations that control it all. And he's kind of a small business guy. So he's not like outright socialism, take from the rich, give to the poor. He's let's break up the rich and give individuals opportunities. That is his mindset, which is very progressive as it is. He's got a three-pronged thing as well. So Teddy Roosevelt had the,
Three C's.
this guy has the triple wall of privilege.
Oh, cool.
The triple wall of privilege. So think of this wall protecting the elitists. He wants to tear down that wall.
Oh, this is one of the terms.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a pretty important one. So if you can remember the triple wall of privilege with Woodrow Wilson, you're golden. How does he want to do it? One wall, one like side of the wall protecting them is the powerful trusts. Another thing protecting the elitists are the tariffs. And another is too much money was in the hands of like J.P. Morgan. So he will attack each and every one of those, and some of his policies are still with us today, notably the banking reform. I'll elaborate on that in 1 second. I got like a crazy wordy slide for you, but then I'm basically done.
JP Morgan was like uncomprehensibly rich.
Yes, J.P. Morgan bailed out the government twice. J.P. Morgan could create an economic panic if he felt like it. So the banking reform will take some of that power away from him and create a new national bank, allowing the government to kind of streamline the economy, not J.P. Morgan. That look okay? I'll elaborate on it on my wordy slide. But triple wall of privilege, I said that. Don't worry about Wilsonian idealism. I'll cover that with foreign policy. So more on that next week. Okay. If you want your basics, look, he does help out the farmers. I don't have any specific acts for you. I'm sure they're out there, but they're never really in the history books, or at least they're not memorable. But it's kind of notable that he helps the farmers, right?
What about the underrated?
I got that in my specific slide. He helps the workers. That's like really notable, right? So here's how I would explain it. If you could tell me about Wilson has a triple wall of privilege. He wants to take that down. He helps the farmers and the workers. It's like, all right, you kind of have a general idea. You might be getting close to a 70. If you got the basics, but then you need to bulk that up. Then you need to tell me how he helps the
Well,
workers.
you haven't told us.
I know, but I'm just saying, this is the basic stuff. Have the basics and back that up with a few actual facts. The facts are coming on the next slide. But I got a quick side note about this guy. Always notable when you get a Supreme Court first. This is the first Jewish Supreme Court member.
Jewish.
Brandeis.
Louis Brandeis.
Who, by the way, is the same guy from I looked it up.
Awesome. From what?
From Annie.
From Annie?
Yeah.
I don't know Annie.
What is he
Well, you
doing?
should.
Is that like...
Annie? You've never
The
seen the movie
redhead
Annie.
girl?
I know the redhead, but no, I don't see the movie or the play Annie.
You've
Never seen the movie.
You've never seen
Come
the
on, say it.
original movie of Annie.
No,
Oh,
I
the new
haven't
one
seen
with
it.
like the little
Man,
cute
we like
girl.
just did it like a
Never
month
seen it in
ago.
my life.
It's about a foster girl that becomes like rich.
Yeah. She's orphan.
So
I
now
heard
I'm
the remake is
curious.
actually kinda
How's
good, though.
Louis Brandeis in there?
They were just like, cause you know, Warbucks is really rich, so they play a lot on the whole like, I'm gonna go to a meeting with the president. So they're like, we're gonna adopt Annie. You know who we're gonna get to help us adopt Annie? Supreme Court Justice Brandeis.
There's a whole song about Herbert Hoover.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
a song about Hoover.
So maybe someday in my life I should watch Annie?
Yeah.
Tomorrow.
That
It's
should
a
be
lot
the
of
next
fun
movie
history
for
stuff.
Movie Club.
I'm gonna know a lot about 1933.
Crash course.
Here's my wordy slide. I'm not going to play it, but maybe you like John Green, or maybe you feel like totally clouded on the progressive era, or maybe you're absent and missing all of this for those people. But click the progressive era and watch John Green's 12-minute take on it.
You should talk to the camera like, you know, like, hey y'all, I'm watching this, like, you need to watch this video.
They're gonna keep hearing you, Gianna, on the video.
Well, see, now I didn't have to know it was mean. I didn't have, that was kind of mean.
I'm sure they know anyway. All right, so looking at Wilson's reforms, this is how he attacks the tariff. He actually lowers it with the Underwood tariff. But now you're thinking, wait a minute, the tariff is lower. How's the government going to make money?
Income tax.
Income tax, 16th Amendment goes into effect. Which, by the way, that had to be challenged so many times in the courts. Corporations didn't think that it was legal to be taxed, so there were like 2 Supreme Court cases that finally said that yes, you can, and then it becomes an amendment, and it's still with us today. So tax rates back in the day were incredibly high. We're talking like by World War I, the wealthiest would be taxed at 90% after a certain amount of income. So you could make like your $1 million, anything above and beyond $1 million would be taxed at 90%. So we do that a number of different times. We're just recently in the low tax, no tax era. So that's kind of a contemporary thing to understand. But taxes back in the day, whoa, you had some really high rates once you made your millions. How do you attack the banks? You give us the Federal Reserve. You go into depth with the Fed in my wife's class next year. We'll just kind of explain it as streamlining the economy. It can provide credit to other banks, and credit is a necessity in times of crisis. It can control the interest rates. Basically, for our case, think of this like another national bank. When's the last time we had a national bank prior to 1913? Jackson killed our previous national bank. Now it's back, now it's bigger, now it's better, it's still with us today. So understand the Fed, lasting contribution. As for attacking the trusts, he does quite a bit. We get the FTC still with us today. It can investigate industries and prevent all sorts of illegal stuff that companies could do. It's going to stop monopolies, stop unfair competition, stop bribery. Can you see how progressive we're getting? I mean, look how powerful each and every one of these is. Look how he is attacking that triple wall of privilege.
It's super easy to get away with stuff prior, like 1900s.
Yes.
That's crazy.
It's,
Like now, like just imagine if a criminal now went back in the day, like you like could kill somebody and they'd be like, well, he just died. Like we don't know what just happened. That's
correct.
insane.
And economically, if you know what you know now, go back before there were any laws preventing that, and you could get away with insider trading or bribery or whatever you wanted to.
You can go around killing people.
John
and
F.
making
Kennedy's
money.
dad made his millions through illegal stock market manipulation, but at the time it wasn't illegal. Kennedy's dad is fascinating. He then is in charge of the SEC, and he's the one that makes all the laws doing the stuff that he did to make his millions. So kind of interesting the more you look into it, but good point. Lastly, look at this. Labor Labor gets something. I know it's wordy, but they get the Clayton Antitrust Act, which is considered a major victory for workers. Basically, they can strike, they're recognized, they get all sorts of rights. Samuel Gompers calls it the Magna Carta of labor, so it's a big deal. I'm sure it does like a book worth of detail. Some historian has probably written 300 pages on the Clayton Antitrust Act, but I think that we're good summarizing it like that.
You know how you said that you can't go on strike in
I
Texas?
can't.
So let's say that y'all all decided, because you said it's automatic like resignation.
Yeah.
Let's say you have like, okay, fine, then let's go on strike. Let's all resign. What would they do? Would they have? Could they?
I
would they-
surrender my contract and my pension.
But like, let's say everyone in the
Everyone
entire
has-
like teacher like decided
So
to go on
then
strike.
everybody's like, you know what, our families are just gonna go without pay, and then we're not gonna be able
We
to
can't
like,
really
fund their
skip a
lifestyle.
paycheck.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I had somebody in another class ask that question, and we actually Googled it, and it was pretty interesting, the stuff that we were finding. So, I'll just leave that to Google.
Okay.
Last slide, you ready? Or last detail?
Yes.
So again, it seems like Wilson's doing all this wonderful stuff, right? Super progressive, getting things done for the worker, regulating the companies, creating a bank, lowering the tariff. But oh yeah, he's also really racist. So here's your extent. The big kind of racist indicator, he formally segregated the government. Keep in mind there were still some like leftovers from Reconstruction who were still there. He officially segregated the government, and he proclaims this movie, which is the most racist movie ever, to be a great insight into history.
The Birth of Nation.
The premise of the movie, Birth of a Nation, it's also called The Klansman, by the way. It depicts former slaves, freed blacks in the Reconstruction South as rapists. And they were all like at a frenzied pace of trying to get at the white women in the South. So they're all depicted in that horrible manner. And who ends up saving the white women? The Klan. And what does the Klan then do to the kind of frenzied former slaves? Lynches them. Whereas Wilson says, oh yeah, that's a great insight into history. He's giving validity to the racism, to the lynching, and to the Klan, which, by the way, makes a mega comeback shortly after this. The Klan will then march in like Stone Mountain, Georgia, burn their cross. They get millions of members by the 1920s, and they kind of go mainstream. So this is a big kickstart to the Klan, and it's going to start this long downhill spiral for African Americans whose hopes at progressivism are getting worse and worse.
So it was a movie, right?
It's a movie.
How did they get the African Americans to
Good
do
question.
this?
Good question.
Why would they do
They
that?
don't.
They force them to
They
be in
paint
this movie.
No,
themselves
it's
black.
yeah.
Blackface.
Blackface.
Which is why it's in part controversial today. White actors in blackface. Yeah.
So they painted their skin.
Yes. I mean, I had to watch this entire movie in a college class, and it's shocking.
You had to watch it.
I had to watch it in a college class just because it is, making history, the way in which they depict this stuff, the impact of it's obviously significant. So Wilson liked it. That's kind of messed up. So we mentioned the extent, again, women still don't have the right to vote. It's getting worse for African Americans. Are there any other groups out there where it could be getting bad? Oh yeah, Native Americans. Real brief on Native Americans here. This is Oklahoma as it was. Oklahoma, again, that's basically the dumping ground for the rest of the tribes. And the thought was, nobody wants Oklahoma because it's kind of, I don't know, hard to live, hard to farm, it's rocky. And that's the story with the Osage. They picked this territory because they thought no one would ever take them off of this territory.
Found gold.
Well, I just had like
Black
a
gold.
moment.
Oil. These are our oil reserves, and oil, by the way, it's discovered in the 1860s in Pennsylvania. All of those wells dry up by the 1880s, and a mega oil reserve is found on Osage territory. And this is when it gets ugly, because the Osage actually had negotiated the reservation rights to include mineral rights. So they're looking to make a ton of money. In fact, they're able to lease that land, they collect the money, and they get 10% of everything extracted. they end up being the wealthiest tribe or the wealthiest group per capita in the entire United States. The tribe was making up to $400 million in today's money. But the government, Congress, deemed the Indians non-citizens and incompetent in managing the money. So get this, Congress made white people in charge of the Indian finances. Each full-blooded Indian was not allowed to spend the money. They had to have a white guardian approve all of their expenses, and then the white guardian could inherit all of the money if the Indians die. Guess what starts to happen? Poison, murder, death. That's the book I'm reading right now. So I'm just
For
like,
fun?
yeah. But I'm able to share my knowledge with you all. But look, I keep learning, people. It's
Awesome.
fascinating and relevant to the progressive era, because if we ever have to note the extent of something, it's getting worse and worse. The FBI eventually is created to investigate all these murders, and it becomes like this serious investigation because any Indian that was helping with it ends up getting killed. So I'm not done with it yet, but I kind of know the end story. Dozens of Indians are murdered for basically their oil rights. This case was recently, and I'm talking like the early 2000s, finally the government said, ooh, we kind of ripped you guys off, and they awarded the tribe like hundreds of millions of dollars, like in 2002 or something. So anyway, that's the story of the Osage. The legacy of progressivism, not everyone benefits, right? But it does change the entire role of the government. So kind of think of this new government that's formed with progressivism. Back in the day, let's say you're a farmer in Texas, a drought takes you out, you need money for seeds. Is the government going to help you?
No.
But you know what? Now they will. By the 20th century, the government steps up. By the 20th century, the government is kind of there as a safety net of sorts where it might regulate the unfair business. It is no longer laissez-faire. It might help out the worker. It might help out those farmers. But again, it does kind of leave out still women, African Americans, Native Americans. But if you can kind of think of progressivism as like a 30-year pendulum cycle type thing, that takes us all the way to modern day. About every 30 years we go progressive. And that again, you can go progressive then conservative, progressive then conservative. Historians have written books all on these pendulum shifts over time.
When was the last time our government was progressive? 1990.
So 30-year shift, we'll kind of see what happens. But in the 1990s, there are a lot of changes that happen. We'll kind of cross that bridge when we get there. But you could say that was a reaction to 1980s conservatism. We then go progressive in the 1990s, shift back maybe recently. Again, history is a kind of a guide for us of what might happen. Just kind of look at the trends. Interesting, to say the least. Real quick preview on the next slide. You guys don't have to sweat it, but my APers,
I do.
you know what I'm making my APers do? I'm making my APers look at this slide and give me detail from every decade, including the presidents. But again, you guys got your college credit for first semester.
Why does everybody have faces?
Because I had a really weird student one year that like kept photoshopping me all over the place, and it's like,
happening this year.
Yeah.
I know, but I don't really understand it, but yeah, that was several years ago.
Wait, where, like, in photoshopping you and then going where?
I don't know. I'll give me a second and I'll show you one of the weird things that student made. They like printed it out and posted it kind of in my room and other rooms.
Were you kind of creeped out by it a little bit? Like, that's
A little bit. I'm like, why are you spending your own time doing this? This was just bizarre to me. But anyway,
That's kind of funny.
I'm not worried
It's
about
so
you
much
guys
easier
in
to
first
Photoshop
semester
now.
stuff.
Like, you
Okay,
could,
I'm
like we could do that in
stopping
like 5 minutes.
Yeah,
Like not even
oh.
5 minutes.
That was
I
Probably
could be done on
Say hi,
30
Anna.
minutes of work.
Yeah, that could.